It's the most wonderful time of the week, but you guys already knew that. It's bold predictions. It's Andy Backstrom and Tim May, and I'm just Spencer Holbrook going to pilot this journey as we make some predictions for what's going to happen in the friendly confines. Who's going to hit a dinger? Who might have an error? We got a double, a little somebody going to hit for the cycle? We don't know, but we do know that it's all going to happen in Wrigley Field. At Wrigley Field, in Wrigley Field, whatever it's called. It's the friendly confines, and it's Lettermen Row's bold predictions. Andy, you get the honors of going first because you are a honorary Chicago native, as having spent some formidable years in the Windy City. I will give you the honors on the plate. At the plate, Tim, you will be on deck, and I'll be in the hole.
So this is going to be pretty bold because I'm going to say that Will Howard will have his second 300-yard passing game of the season against Northwestern. And that's really only bold because I don't know how long Will Howard will play into this game. But given how the season has gone, they haven't really taken him out before the fourth quarter in most of these games. So I'm going to say he stays in long enough to hit this mark. Northwestern has given up 241.1 passing yards per game. That's 15th in the Big Ten, 100th nationally. Indiana threw for 380 yards. Maryland threw for 296 yards. And even Purdue threw for 290 yards. So I think Will Howard gets to 300, and that'll be the first time he has done so since Oregon and the second time all season.
Tim?
See, I told you last week they could throw the ball as much as they wanted and gotten as many yards as they wanted. I asked our Chip Kelly about that in the press conference on what was that Tuesday about, do you ever just like go in a game, just think throw it 50 times, you know what I mean, for the hell of it. But they could do the same thing this week. I'm looking more at the rushing aspect of things, although I think they won't both of these running backs, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, get into the game and then get out of the game with, in essence, the meat of the schedule coming up, hosting Indiana and Michigan. With that said, and I hope this isn't what you were going to pick, Spence, but I see Travion Henderson getting out of the blocks on Saturday. It's the place where Gale Sayre scored 6 touchdowns way back in 1965. I see Travion scoring 3 touchdowns in the game minimum. I pulled that with Jeremiah Smith last week. Didn't pay off for me, but I'm going now with the Holy Triad. Travion Henderson scoring 3 touchdowns, either by hook, running the ball, or by crook, catching and running the ball. Final answer, Travion Henderson score minimum 3 touchdowns.
So I'm going to have to break a rule here because I was going to do an offensive bold prediction, but I don't want all 3 of them to be offensive this week because I think this defense is playing too good for that to be the case. So I'm going to give like an additional one when we do offensive player of the game, but just know that I was going to give an offensive one here, but I want to spread the love to the defense. They're going to get to a 12th quarter without giving up a touchdown. This defense is. I don't know how Northwestern moves the ball with consistency on this team. They scored 26 on Purdue. That's fine. That's fine. They scored 14 on Iowa, 3 against Wisconsin, and I don't think Wisconsin's very good at all. They got to 24 against Indiana. They only did 5 against Washington. So the more athletic, if you talk about like the teams that recruit at even like a middle of the pack Big Ten level, I would say when you look at Wisconsin and Washington, that's 3 points and 5 points. Defense is about athleticism. Northwestern does not have athleticism in this offense. I think it's not a bad offense, but I don't think it's good enough. And I just don't see a way that they're going to move the ball consistently against Ohio State. And if you don't score on the 1 or 2 drive, if you don't score touchdowns on the 1 or 2 drives that Ohio State does have any lapses on, you're probably not scoring a touchdown at all. And so I'm going to predict not necessarily a shutout. I think there will be a couple field goals here, but I'm going to predict that Ohio State's defense holds strong, gets to that 12th quarter without giving up a touchdown. And the last team to have scored a touchdown on this defense will be Nebraska for another week. And then they go into Indiana, which, that'll be a little bit of a more difficult task to keep them out of the end zone. But that's my bold prediction, as Tim would like to say. Final answer. Andy, you're back up. We've batted around already. Tim, you're back on deck. I hope you're taking those practice swings with the donut on the bat because It's a big one for you. Offensive player of the game, Andy. You got to go Will Howard, right?
No. I'm going Emeka Egbuka. He's had
Oh,
a combined 7 catches the last 3 games. The last time he had only 1 catch in a game before this past week against Purdue was last season against Michigan State. It was actually around the same time in November. The following week, he had 5 catches for 83 yards against Minnesota. I think he'll have an even better day, match at least the 7 combined receptions that he's had the previous 3 games, and I think he'll find the end zone again. So I think they'll share some love with Emeka Egbuka. It feels like whenever there's a guy on this offense who doesn't get his touches the game before, they make sure he gets them the game after. So I'm going with Emeka Egbuka in this one.
Tim, you've been taking those warm-up swings. Offensive player of the game. Get that donut off the bat. What do you got?
Man, I'm torn because obviously I picked Travion Henderson, scored minimum 3 touchdowns. But, fellas, I got to go back to the well. I got to go back to my is he a right-hander or left-hander, Jeremiah Smith?
I think he's the righty.
I think he swings both. I think he can swing from either side of the plate. So I'm going with Jeremiah Smith to hit several home runs in this one. Jeremiah Smith, all they can do is blanket him, and I'm not sure blanketing him will keep him cornered, so to speak. I'm trying to think of every cliche I can think of how you take a receiver away. This idea that people may play 3 deep or something and force you to throw underneath. That's okay with me. If I'm Ohio State, throw the ball to Jeremiah Smith underneath and let him do his thing like Emeka Egbuka. I'm going with Jeremiah Smith to have a big day somehow, some way. I'm not going to predict the stats, but Jeremiah Smith will be my offensive player of the week for Ohio State. Final answer.
Yeah, Andy, I hate to do this to you, but I had made up my mind already, and I already explained myself a little bit that I was going to go defensive with the bold prediction because I wanted to talk about Emeka Egbuka as my offensive player of the game. So we're just going to share an offensive player of the game if you don't mind. I think Emeka Egbuka is going to get close to 150 receiving yards in this game. His stats, like you said, Andy, have been down tremendously the last 3 games after the 10-catch performance against Oregon. Just not getting the ball as much as I think Ohio State wants him to. And I think the Buckeyes understand that when they look at this, they see the touches for all these guys, and they know that number 2 is one of their best playmakers, and he's just not getting the ball enough. And I think it's going to be a known effort by Will Howard to get his senior receiver the football, to get them back in a rhythm, get that connection back going before the 2-game stretch against Indiana and Michigan, because he's going to be so critical in those 2 games. I think it's important to get him involved, and I think Ohio State's going to do that in bunches, whether that's out of the backfield, whether that's in the receiving game, whether that's even on things like punt return, just any way to get the ball back in his hands after not seeing it in there enough the last few weeks. I think number 2 is going to have a big game for this offense. So I'm going to ride with you, Andy, here and take Emeka as my offensive player of the game. But now I need your defensive player of the game, and you might stick with another number 2. I don't know. You like picking Caleb Downs on this.
I'm going Cody Simon for this game. He had 2 missed tackles last week against Purdue. Still played really well, but was hard on himself for those 2 missed tackles. I don't think he'll have a missed tackle this time around. Even if he has 1, I think he'll still end with 10-plus tackles in this game, because you're looking at this Northwestern offense. They have a quarterback in Jack Lausch who just doesn't really push the ball successfully downfield. He's only got 5 completions on throws, 20-plus air yards. You go down to the next category of 10 to 19 air yards. He's got 13 of those. So they just throw a lot of passes around the line of scrimmage in that 0 to 9 yard range. So I think there'll be a lot of work for Cody Simon in the second level to clean some stuff up, as well as in the run game that he can do some dirty work. So I'm going with Cody Simon in this game. Also, note about Jack Lausch, which is interesting. Used to play baseball. He actually was committed to play baseball as a walk-on at Notre Dame, and then ultimately got the scholarship to play football at Northwestern, decided to flip and ended up there. So, and it's also noteworthy that he averages 8.7 attempts on the ground per game. So they're going to run him a little bit as well. He's a dual threat guy. So that's another thing for the linebackers to have to clean up as well. So I'm going Cody Simon. A lot of work to be done for him on Saturday in Wrigley.
Tim?
Yeah, I hope the Buckeyes wake up more clear-eyed than I did this morning. But I digress. I keep wanting this guy to have this kind of game only because I think he deserves it. I think he works his rear end off in preparation, etc. I think he works his rear end off on the field in terms of lining up hither, thither, and yon. I'm going to go with Caleb Downs to be defensive player of the game. Caleb Downs' final answer. I think how many times have I said this? I think he finally gets his hands on the ball and does something with it extraordinary. Maybe as a punt returner, but I would count that more in his defensive stats. So I'm going to go with Caleb Downs, transfer from Alabama, Mr. Reliable. I could pick him or Lathan Ransom every other game and be very happy and content with my pick, but this time is Caleb Downs' final answer.
I think you do that, Tim.
I think I have been doing that.
I think I'm going to have to roll back the tape, but I think that you pick them basically every week, and I don't mind that. That's fine with me.
No, I picked Denzel Burke one week, I know, and he had a pretty good game against Nebraska, kind of a bounce back from the Oregon game. So I know I picked Denzel Burke once, and I might have picked Iggy. I mean, Davis and Igbinosun once, just because I like the way he plays. But you're right. Most of the time, I take the safety. I think safety first because I've always been that kind of human being.
Yeah, you're this week you're taking the center fielder.
There you go. He might play left field too. He might shoot up and play third or fifth infielder.
Yeah, that's true. It's interesting to me, Tim, that Caleb Downs has 2 interceptions last year at Alabama, a forced fumble last year at Alabama. That's 3 forced turnovers just by him alone. Yep. This year, no forced turnovers. I think his stats overall, body of work, is actually better. Of course, last year he had 107 tackles. This year he's only got 40, but 6 tackles for loss compared to 4 last year. He's got a half a sack this year compared to none last year. Like, Ohio State's just using him differently than Alabama did. Plus, that Alabama defense kind of stunk last year. And he had to save them a lot. So, this isn't a Caleb Downs breakdown show, but I do think that it's interesting that, like, he's just playing in a different role. And I hope that doesn't ding him when it comes to these national awards, things like that.
When Nick Saban took that, I don't think it was a cheap shot, but that kind of a shot about Ohio State playing an antique style up front on defense. I'm just going to go back and look at your last defense of your career, Nick Saban, and tell me you were proud of that one when your safety was leading the team in tackles. Yeah. And it wasn't because he was up playing on defensive end and linebacker. I mean, they finally got found out by one of the more least explosive teams in America, Michigan, last year, and got thumped in his final game as the head coach. I'm not knocking Nick Saban. He is the greatest of all time statistically and everything else. But I never thought his defenses from year to year were what Alabama hung their hat on. They hung their hat on big, huge playmakers on offense and stuff, and just kind of forcing you into a little bit of a corner, and then playing really great defense against the crappy teams.
All right, my defensive player of the game.
But other than that, I have no opinion.
My defensive player of the game is going to be Jack Sawyer. It's pretty simple. He had a great game last week. This is the exact time last year where he started to peak. He started to play really well. If last week's an indicator, it looks like he might have another November surge in him, which would mean great play through November, December, and maybe even January if this team does what it wants to do and takes care of the business it wants to take care of. Simple enough. I don't need to explain myself any further. Jack Sawyer. Northwestern's only given up, I think, 12 sacks this year as a team. I don't think Ohio State's going to have 12 sacks on Saturday, but if you told me Jack had 1.5 or had a couple solo sacks, and starts to build momentum as he did last November, I'd believe you. So I'll go with Jack Sawyer. Andy, what's your final score pick?
35-7 Ohio State. I don't know if they're going to get up into the 40s or 50s. I feel like baseball stadium games can be a little bit weird. Who knows what the wind's going to be? It doesn't sound like it's going to be bad, but you never really know the day of, especially in a place like Chicago. So I'm going with 35 points to Ohio State scores. I do think they give up 1 touchdown. I think it'll be late in the game, not with the first team defense. I don't think they quite get to 12 quarters, Spencer, but maybe they get to 10 or 11 in this game. But yeah, I think it'll be a good day for Ohio State. Get in, get out. But I don't think we're going to see like a 50-point burger or any kind of crazy offensive fireworks that we haven't seen before this season.
Tim?
Yeah, Ohio State 45. I'm going to go with the same score I picked last week because let's face it, Purdue did miss 2 very makeable field goals, except for, I guess, for them. But I'm going to go with Ohio State 45, Northwestern 9. I am in the Spencer camp. I believe the touchdown shutout continues. Now, when we say that, though, does that include if they were mistakenly to give up an offensive you know what I mean, an interception or a scoop and score?
No, because then the Penn State stat wouldn't be real.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I guess I answered my question while I was asking it
Yeah.
in my head because I thought of the exact same thing. So, yeah, Ohio State 45, Northwestern 9, final answer.
Okay, I'm going to go 31-3. I just think this is a get in, get out operation for Ohio State. I don't think they're going to really push the envelope here. They can say what they want. I don't think anybody's super thrilled about the turf situation at Wrigley Field or the setup there with the end zones and just not ideal playing conditions for this team. And they've got bigger fish to fry coming up against the Hoosiers, and then obviously the big one in the rivalry game. And then if you take care of all of that business, you get Oregon again. Like, it's a pretty demanding 3-game stretch coming up. I think this is more so than Purdue, a get in and get out effort for Ohio State. Very business-like trip to Wrigley Field. I don't know if 31 runs has ever been scored at Wrigley. I'll have to look that up for myself, but I think Ohio State is going to bat around a few times, get to 31, and Northwestern might hit a 3-run shot into right field there at that goalpost. But other than that, not much offense to speak of. I think the Buckeyes are going to take care of business, come back to Columbus, and then gear up for that massive, what will be, as long as Ohio State wins, top 5 matchup in the horseshoe between Ohio State and Indiana. But this is Ohio State Northwestern. It's bold predictions. It's Lettermen Row. That is Andy Backstrom over there in the middle. Nope, wrong way. That's Andy Backstrom. That is Tim May. I'm just Spencer Holbrook, trying to get my directions all correct like Ohio State will with these wins coming through the Windy City on Saturday. It's not at Ryan Field. It's at Wrigley Field, but you already knew that because you've been watching Lettermen Row all week. Now you're going to watch Lettermen Row head up to Chicago, cover the game at Wrigley Field, and you'll be back here to watch Rapid Reaction after the game from Ohio State Northwestern. We're going to get to Chicago. We're going to go cover the Buckeyes. Go to lettermenrow.com. Get your membership right now. Like the video below. Subscribe to the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. We'll see you in the Windy City for Ohio State Northwestern at Wrigley Field.